Testing, testing. All right, folks, congratulations. You've made it to the last lesson for world history at Odyssey Charter School. We're looking at lesson 16, and we're going to kind of look into the future and really look at what are some of the challenges that the world faces from here into the next phase of our life as residents of the Earth. What are we going to be looking at? How are we going to work together? What are some challenges that we have? The reading for this particular lesson is going to be chapter 32, pages 969 to 973, and really is going to focus on where we go from here. So it's a nice kind of ending point for our discussions over the course of this semester. Some of the terms I'd like you to look for are ecology, global warming, bioterrorism, and peacekeeping. So if you could look for those terms, that would be great. So as we look into the future, we have a number of different issues that we're going to probably be dealing with that we can anticipate at this point, and obviously a number of other issues that will come up that we had no idea were going to be of concern. Some of the ones that we definitely know we're going to have to look at as a world include things like population growth. The world population currently is a little over 6 billion people, but is rising fairly quickly, and is rising in parts of the world where the people have less ability to support themselves than others. The United States and Europe tend to be fairly flat or even declining in terms of population, but areas like Africa, Latin America, and Asia are growing rapidly. So how are we going to deal with all these new people on the Earth that all need the services? And some of the problems that we have associated with a very rapid population growth are things like needing to cut down forests for home building and paper production, the overuse of land that leads to the rising of the deserts, changes in water and air quality, and then also overall global health. So we have to really face those kind of issues. That's going to be a concern, and as I said, certainly in the poorer nations of the world, this could be a real problem. Another problem we have to be aware of is global warming. Now, we've certainly talked about this in our society a lot recently, and it's the idea, of course, that the additional carbon dioxide that's being released by industrial nations is changing the patterns of weather and the patterns of heat on our planet. It's trapping more heat in, and that can lead to a number of different factors. Things like increased storms, melting ice caps, which would lead to a rise in sea level, and overall areas that we currently are inhabitable by humans could potentially become inhabitable. So we have to understand what the process is, and then we need to, as a world, really kind of look to how can we decrease the amount of carbon that's being emitted into the atmosphere. A lot of nations are trying to do that right now. Some, like China, for example, that has just recently started to become an industrialized world power, doesn't want to limit their carbon output because it's what's made them powerful. So this is, again, this is something that goes across world borders or global borders, and we have to really think about it from a world level as opposed to a national level. Some other things that we've seen recently, and certainly you all know about this a lot, is the revolution in communications. Rather than an industrialized world now, we have become kind of a data and communication world. And the nations that can do better with those things are probably going to be the most powerful ones in the future. This is certainly led by the personal computer, which has changed the way we work, changed the way we interact with each other, changed the way that we move data from place to place. The internet is a huge piece that has changed more than you can even probably comprehend how the world has worked for hundreds and hundreds of years. And as I said, the new economy is really focused on information as opposed to industry. And we can keep contact from almost every corner of the world, which changes the way that we do business and the way that we travel. We're also seeing some changes in healthcare and agriculture. Certainly new medicines have allowed doctors around the world to treat people more effectively and to continue to allow for life expectancies to rise. The average age of people dying in most parts of the world is getting older, which is obviously a positive thing until you think again back to our discussion about population growth. If we have more people living longer, that's going to increase the number of people that are on the earth at any given time. We also have some philosophical issues that we have to deal with related to genetic engineering, changing the very genes of the things that we eat, Is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing? What are the long-term implications of that? We really have to discuss. And then the overuse of pesticides, the idea that we're using chemicals to make our fields more fertile, but what could be the long-term use and problems associated with those pesticides. Warfare also has changed based on our new technology. And certainly we see in Iraq and Afghanistan that the United States and some of the Western nations have this incredible amount of technology at their fingertips. Sometimes it's effective and sometimes it's not. But we have some real concerns that we need to deal with. One is related to nuclear technology. New nations, places like Iran, Pakistan, now we believe have nuclear weapons, and we are concerned about what that could look like when these nations that are not friendly with the United States and with the West have access to these incredibly destructive weapons. Also bioterrorism. We saw certainly after 9/11 things like the anthrax scare, the idea that biological and chemical weapons could be used against large numbers of people is a concern. And the fact that the Soviet Union has collapsed with its huge arsenal. Many of those weapons are unaccounted for and could have been sold and residing in nations and with groups that are not particularly friendly with the United States. We're also seeing a growth in the gap between the rich and the poor. This economy that we're currently in may change that a little bit because it's certainly stopping the rapid growth of the rich. But we definitely see the haves and the have-nots as moving further apart, especially when you look at it away from just America, but more on a global standpoint. We see a number of nations that are exporting raw materials to nations outside their borders, but don't have enough money to bring in the finished product. So they might have iron ore that they send out, they sell, but they don't have enough money to bring in the car when it's completed. So that's a real problem. We're also seeing growing population leading to growing poverty and unemployment around the world. And some jobs are actually moving away from wealthier nations into nations that can provide cheaper labor. And we're certainly seeing that in the United States as jobs move south and jobs move into India because the labor is cheaper there. There are also some threats to world health that we need to be aware of. As we become more interconnected because of our technology and because of the ease of travel, we're seeing world health threats that are not contained in just certain areas and move across the globe. AIDS, starting in the 1970s and 80s, certainly is a concern, and it's growing rapidly in Africa. Matter of fact, several of the sub-Saharan African nations are actually losing their life expectancy. It's going down because of things like AIDS. And it's estimated that about 42 million people may have died worldwide from AIDS by 2002, so even more obviously by today. Other global outbreaks we have some concerns about over the last few years. We've had SARS and the avian flu, and how do we contain those because of our rapid travel is a real concern. Finally, we really, I think, need to consider ourselves as one global community as opposed to a series of independent nations in order to tackle some of these. As we've seen, these are not issues that can be resolved by the United States or by Germany or by Brazil. They have to be tackled on a worldwide international framework. And the vehicle to do that is the United Nations. We talked a little bit about the idea that the United Nations was formed after World War II as a forum to really discuss global concerns. Most nations, the vast majority of them, belong to it, but only about 15 of those member nations really have the power to make massive decisions for the rest of the world. So there's a structural problem there that a lot of nations don't like. And the United Nations has been involved in peacekeeping missions with kind of mixed results. So I think we need to move away more to thinking ourselves as Americans, maybe, in certain aspects, and more as global citizens as we move into your adulthood and some of the challenges you're going to face. So I'd like to thank you for your attention over this semester. I hope it's been worthwhile and you've picked a couple things up. And certainly good luck with your future studies, and have a wonderful summer.